How's it going, everyone? Welcome back to the Black Metal Rebellion. I'm your host, Jesse Morgan, aka Slammerella, and today, guess what? Yep, it's another review. We've been just going crazy with the reviews on this channel lately. I'm probably going to need a break very soon because I'm kind of getting word out on the reviews, but I couldn't say no when this one came across my email. This is the latest album by The Bleeding called Monocrator. It's their third album. Let's just throw it up over here for now. And it was released in June 9th, 2023. Again, this year. I just pimp slapped my mic that honestly doesn't even work. So I don't know why I have it in half of these shots. So who are The Bleeding? They are a thrashing death metal band out of London, England. They're more thrash with death metal sprinkled in for the most part, and they started in 2010. They have been fairly busy since then, so let's get started with some of their previous work before we get into the review of this album. So previously to Monocrator, they had a EP in 2013 called Death Eternal. And then following that up a couple of years later in 2017 with their debut album, Rites of Absolution, right here, which I feel like I need to track down and get because I'm pretty sure I don't have that album. I have a couple of theirs and I have a physical release of one of them, but let's get on to their next EP that released in 2019 called Demonic Oath. Following that is the album that I actually do have a physical copy of, and that is their second album from 2019, a little later that year, called Morbid Prophecy. This album slayed. It was super duper good. I don't remember if I did a review of it. If not, I'm going to have to do a retroactive review sometime later this year. So yeah, excellent album from The Bleeding there. And then before this latest and third album came out, they came out with another EP in 2021 called Rise Into Nothing, which I got a digital copy of back when it came out. So yeah, it was a little bit different from Morbid Prophecy, and this third album, Monocrator, is a little bit different from both of those. So they've been going through kind of an evolution as they've been going as a band, like most bands do, but they've been getting pretty refined, and I think that they're really onto something with this latest release. So let's talk about the members from Monocrator. First is Jamie Stungo on vocals, and then that follows up with Tassos on guitars. Hope I'm pronouncing your name properly. Then Jordan Muscatello on bass, and lastly but not leastly, James Lowe on drums. So let's talk about those vocals from Jamie Stungo. They were high in the mix, but not too overbearing. A great performance throughout the album though. They were a high to mid-tone, scratchy, raspy thrash vocals for the most part, akin to sort of like Chuck Schuldiner. And then there's the odd blah kind of vocals thrown in, briefly touched on in the track Union of Horror. And there was a second type of vocals that I noticed, a higher pitched shrill vocal type, sort of like Jamie Hooper of 3 Inches of Blood. So it seems the Jamies have that kind of thrash thing in their blood. Alright, moving on to what you could expect from the guitars, aka Tassos' realm. They were higher end of the mid mix. They were just under the vocals for the most part in volume. Absolutely incredible control and precision. Performance was peak in this release. What you could expect from the riff side of things are breakneck speed power chords, some chainsaw ripping tremolos, pinch harmonics, zippy energetic solos, and some bludgeoning paced gallops and shugs. A couple of pinch harmonic standouts were in the track Monocrator, so the self-titled track of this album. So check that out if you want to hear what I'm talking about. Next up is the bass, covered by Jordan Muscatello. It was low to mid in the mix, and it had a seemingly good performance as well. It was not super duper easy to pick out amongst all the other craziness that was going on, but it did have a few moments to shine, like in the tracks Chemical Lobotomy, Throes of Repulsion, Chainsaw Death Cult, and Mutation Chamber. The bass had a very crunchy tone with lots of gain and punch to it, and again, had a few moments to shine and pop out and do a few licks before settling back into the fold. Alright, let's move on to the drums, which is James Lowe. It was mid-mix for the drums, just slightly under the guitars. Great EQ though and balance in the mix. A great performance overall. Crazy good double kicks. Excellent cymbal and tom work and fills, some smooth tempo and beat transitions, and it had a very crispy, punchy kick drum tone. I am very impressed with the talent going on in this project in the drum and guitar section. Alright, let's move on to a couple of my favorite tracks off of this album. Starting off with track number 4, Union of Horror. It just had an insanely good main reoccurring riff that happened throughout the song, and at the 2-minute and 40-second mark had this really sick solo, so that's why it brings it up to the top of my list here. Following up track number 4 is track number 8, Throes of Repulsion. It was probably the grooviest track on the album, albeit still super duper fast paced. Next in my favorite tracks is track number 6, which is On Wings of Tribulation. Also a fairly groovy, foreboding opening riff. It kind of gets brought back later on near the end, but heavier and faster, and I love that shit. When bands bring a riff from the beginning of a song back again, but even just grimier and grittier and heavier, it gets you throwing up the invisible oranges and bobbing your head. Yeah, I really enjoyed that. And then moving on to track number 2, Chainsaw Death Cult. You gotta love the track just for the name alone. It was probably one of the fastest rippers on the whole album. Excellent intensity throughout the whole song, and there is just a moment where it slows down for a tiny bit, but that's still probably around the 200 beats per minute mark, so yeah, if you count that as slow, but it definitely has a nice little quick little change of pace and then back to ripping your head off. I was going to give a honorable mention to Mutation Chamber, because that was also pretty good when I was going through this a few times, but if I give an honorable mention to Mutation Chamber, I'm going to have to give an honorable mention to the other 3 tracks on this because they're just as good. So yeah, we're just going to stick with track number 4, 8, 6, and 2 as my favorites for this album. Let's move on to my overall thoughts. So, my overall thoughts for Moto Crater is that the Bleeding are fast as fuck, boy, in this latest release. Moto Crater is a pulse pounder of a death metal thrash attack. I can hear riffs resembling that of Death, Cannibal Corpse, Toxic Holocaust, Creator, and even some early Sepultura. So there is definitely no shortage of thrash or death metal staples in there for riffs and groove. Lots of excellently crafted compositions for you to sink your teeth into either way. This would be the perfect soundtrack for something like a Twisted Metal or a live action Metalocalypse film. Speaking of which, who here is interested in the Twisted Metal series that's on streaming right now? I might have to check that out. And my last thought about this album is that Moto Crater pulls the ripcord and doesn't let up until the last note is plucked. Angrily and aggressively, might I add. Okay, so this is the part where we go on to the weaknesses and improvements that could be made on the album. And the only thing that I could say about this is that maybe it's too breakneck and too often. I feel like it could have slowed down just a tad here and there to balance things out. And if we're really being nitpicky, it is the snare could have been a little bit louder in the mix, just a pinch, because I felt that the kick drum was a good level. It could also maybe just a tiny pinch louder, but the snare is normally a bigger component when it comes to thrash, and especially death metal, like brutal death metal and slam. You really hear that snare going on there. So to hear it kind of being outshined by everything else was a bit of a surprise that I wasn't able to just pick that up right away and go, oh, this is the snare and this is how it sounds. So yeah, those are my 2 minor ass fucking gripes with this album. It's a really great album. The guitars are great. The drumming is great. The vocals are pretty much perfect for this. Not too growly and dark and death metal-y, but also not too shrill and high and power metal-y. I can't stand it when it gets too high sometimes in thrash metal bands. I'm looking at you, Toxic. Ugh. Nope, and I'm glad it doesn't do that overkill vocals thing. That the vocalist in Overkill just keeps on getting worse and worse and worse, in my opinion. All that being said, I'm gonna give The Bleeding's Motocrator and third album a solid 9.5 out of 10. This is a fantastic album. Thank you so much to The Bleeding for sending me a complimentary digital review copy of this to listen to and really dive deep. I will definitely be trying to pick up a physical copy on CD in the future, because I can't not have this in my collection, especially after having the Morbid Prophecy release. So yeah, thanks for adding another thing to my list. I'm gonna have to pick up in the near future. Bleeding, appreciate it. And as always, the links will be in the description box below. Go check out The Bleeding's latest album. I guarantee if you're into thrash or like a thrashing death metal or even maybe death metal, you will probably enjoy the fuck out of this album. So cheers, thanks for watching, thanks again to The Bleeding, and we'll see you in the next video. For Glory, for the Rebellion, Slammerella out. Fast as fuck, boy.